It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The only sound in my sterile 32nd floor Chicago apartment was the wind whipping snow against the glass. Then my phone lit up. A video notification from my father, Robert. Assuming it was an emergency regarding the colonial house I had been paying for 2 years, I opened it immediately. It wasn't an emergency, it was a pocket dial. The camera was angled at the ceiling of their overheated living room, but the audio was crystal clear. My father was laughing. "Jasmine, she is a glorified ATM without a PIN code. She thinks paying the mortgage buys her respect, it just buys her silence." Then my sister Gabrielle's voice cut in. "Pathetic failure. Before I tell you exactly how I made them, regret every single syllable of that conversation, drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I want to know who is standing with me today." I didn't drop the phone. I didn't gasp. I didn't even cry. I just stood there in the center of my living room while the Chicago winter seemed to seep through the double-paned glass and settle directly into my bones. The shock didn't feel like panic. It felt like freezing. It was a clarifying absolute zero that stopped everything in its tracks. I pressed play again. This time I didn't listen to the words. I watched the data points. I looked past my father's red laughing face to the wall behind him. Mounted there was a new 85-inch OLED television. I hadn't bought that. I looked at the floor next to Gabrielle's feet, 3 shopping bags from a luxury boutique on Michigan Avenue spilling tissue paper onto the rug. I hadn't paid for those either. Or maybe I had. Maybe the $4,250 I sent every month for the mortgage wasn't just keeping a roof over their heads. Maybe it was subsidizing the lifestyle they felt entitled to while I sat here in the dark keeping my thermostat at 62 degrees to save money. I realized then that I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't a person. I was a utility. I was the electricity that kept the lights on, the Wi-Fi signal that kept them connected, the silent infrastructure they only noticed when it stopped working. For years I had told myself that my competence was my shield. I thought that if I was useful enough, if I was the one holding the structure together, I would be safe. I thought my reliability made me indispensable. But standing there in the blue light of my phone, I finally understood the architecture of my own life. My competence wasn't a shield. It was a cage. I hadn't built a home for my family. I had built a comfortable prison for myself, and I had handed them the keys. I had constructed a waiting room for their abuse, stocked it with luxury goods, and paid a premium for the privilege of being mocked in it. I closed the video. The time for being the good daughter was over. Now I was just a manager handling a non-performing asset. I opened my banking app. The Face ID unlocked the screen instantly, revealing my checking account. There it was, pending at the top of the list. Scheduled transfer to Better Home Mortgages, $4,250. My thumb hovered over the transaction. In the past, the thought of missing a payment would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. I would have worried about my father's credit score, about my mother's fragile nerves, about the shame of foreclosure. But that anxiety belonged to Jasmine, the daughter. Jasmine, the liability manager, felt nothing but the cold precision of a necessary audit. I tapped the transaction. I selected Cancel Recurring Series. A confirmation box popped up, asking if I was sure. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I hit Confirm. The little green circle spun for a second, and then the line item vanished. Just like that, the money stayed in my account. The tether was cut. But I wasn't done. If I left the lines of communication open, the manipulation would start the moment the bank sent the non-payment notification. They would call, they would scream, they would cry, and I couldn't afford to let their noise contaminate my clarity. I went to my contacts. Robert, block caller. Cynthia, block caller. Gabrielle, block caller. I even scrolled down to Aunt Jacqueline, the family enforcer, and blocked her too. I set my phone down on the glass coffee table. The silence in the apartment was heavy, absolute, and for the first time in 2 years it belonged entirely to me. I poured myself a glass of water and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen lake. I would give them 48 hours of silence. Let them think it was a glitch. Let them think the bank made a mistake. Let them sit in the comfort I had paid for, completely unaware that the eviction notice wasn't coming from the bank. It was coming from me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet. I had named the file Family Legacy Preservation, a title that now looked pathetic in the harsh blue light of the screen. I scrolled to the bottom of column B. The sum formula calculated the total automatically. $102,000. That was the price tag of my stupidity over the last 24 months. 2 years ago, my father had called me in a panic. The bank was foreclosing on the colonial house in the suburbs, the house they called the family legacy. He cried. He told me he had failed us. He told me I was the only one who could save the history of our name. I believed him. I stepped in. I took over the mortgage payments, the property taxes, and even the lease on the luxury SUV my sister Gabrielle insisted she needed for her image as an aspiring lifestyle influencer. $4,250 a month? To make those payments, I had turned my own life into a study in austerity. I meal prepped rice and beans on Sundays because buying lunch at work was an unauthorized expense. I wore the same winter coat for 3 years. I kept my apartment temperature at a level that required wool socks in October. I denied myself vacations, dinners out, and simple comforts, convinced that my sacrifice was building a safety net for the people I loved. Meanwhile, I was funding their excess. While I ate leftovers, they ordered gourmet takeout. While I walked to the train station in the freezing wind, Gabrielle drove to the mall in a heated leather seat I was paying for. I had assumed they were struggling. I had assumed the money was barely keeping their heads above water. But the video proved otherwise. The money wasn't a lifeline. It was an allowance. I stared at the blinking cursor. Why had I done it? Why had I poured 6 figures into a black hole? It wasn't because I was naive. It was because I was an addict. I was addicted to a psychological mechanism known as intermittent reinforcement. It's the same principle that keeps gamblers pulling the lever on a slot machine. If the machine never paid out, you would walk away. If it paid out every time, you would get bored. But if it paid out unpredictably just once in a while, you would stay hooked forever. That was my family. They knew exactly how to dose out the affection. For every 3 months of silence or criticism, they would give me one moment of praise. We couldn't do this without you, Jasmine, at Thanksgiving. You're the rock of this family, in a birthday card. Those crumbs of validation were the jackpot, and I had spent $102,000 chasing the high of feeling seen. I wasn't paying for a house. I was paying for the hope that one day, the transaction would finally turn into love. I was paying for the fantasy that if I just gave enough, I would finally be worth keeping. But looking at the spreadsheet now, I saw the truth. It wasn't an investment, it was a sunk cost. In economics, a sunk cost is money that has already been spent and cannot be recovered. The irrational decision is to throw more money after it, hoping to make it worth it. The rational decision is to cut your losses and walk away. I highlighted the entire spreadsheet. I didn't delete it. I saved it as a PDF and moved it into a folder named Evidence. The Bank of Jasmine was officially closed. I wasn't going to spend another cent chasing a jackpot that didn't exist. I was cashing out. The first of the month arrived with the punctuality of a bill collector. For the past 2 years, the first of the month meant a confirmation email from my bank at 9 in the morning, followed by absolute silence from my family. No thank you, no received, just the quiet satisfaction of a parasite that had been fed. But today was different. Today the feeding schedule had been interrupted. I sat at my kitchen island, a cup of black coffee steaming in the gray morning light. My phone was face up on the counter. I had unblocked their numbers 10 minutes ago, not because I intended to speak to them, but because I needed to monitor the fallout. I needed to see the data. At 9:05 a.m., the first notification arrived. It was my mother, Cynthia. A voice note. I pressed play. Her voice was trembling, pitched high in that fragile glass-shattering register she used whenever she wanted to bypass logic and go straight for guilt. Jasmine, are you okay? The transfer didn't come through. We thought maybe you were in an accident. Please call us. We are terrified. I took a sip of coffee. She wasn't terrified that I was hurt. She was terrified that the safety net was gone. 3 minutes later, a second voice note. The fragility was gone, replaced by the sharp edge of panic. Jasmine, this isn't funny. The mortgage is due tomorrow. If it's late, there is a penalty fee. You know your father's heart can't take this kind of stress. Pick up the phone. Then came Gabrielle. Her texts didn't bother with the pretense of concern. They were short, lowercase, and frantic. My card just got declined at the pump. WTF. Fix it. I'm standing here like an idiot. I watched the messages stack up on the lock screen like error logs on a system crash. It was fascinating in a clinical sort of way. I was watching a supply chain collapse in real time. The primary resource, my money, had been cut off, and the downstream effects were immediate and catastrophic. Then came my father, Robert. He didn't text. He called. Once. Twice. 3 times. When I didn't answer, he left a voicemail. I listened to the transcription as it scrolled across the screen. Jasmine, honey, give me a call when you get this. I think there's a glitch with the bank. Don't worry, we can sort it out, but I need you to handle it before noon. Love you. The benevolent dictator. He was playing the role of the calm patriarch, assuming that his competent daughter had simply made a clerical error. He assumed I was scrambling to fix it. He assumed I was on the phone with the bank right now, sweating, apologizing, trying to make sure his comfort remained uninterrupted. He had no idea that I was the glitch. I scrolled through the history. In the span of 45 minutes, they had cycled through worry, victimization, entitlement, and anger, but not once in the dozens of messages now clogging my phone did anyone ask if I needed help. Not once did anyone ask if I was struggling financially. The assumption was absolute: I existed to provide. If I wasn't providing, I was malfunctioning. They didn't know I had seen the video. They didn't know I had heard them laughing. They thought the ATM is just broken. I set the phone back down. I didn't type a response. I didn't call the bank. I didn't transfer the funds. I simply let the silence stretch out, heavy and suffocating for them, but for me, it was the first breath of air I had taken in years. I watched the notifications roll in for another hour, observing the desperation rise like a fever chart. Then I turned the phone over face down and opened my work laptop. The panic was theirs to manage now. My ledger was balanced. At 2 o'clock, the second wave of the assault began. My phone lit up with a call from Aunt Jacqueline. In every toxic family system, there are roles. My father was the king ruling by decree. My mother was the martyr ruling by guilt. Gabrielle was the golden child, exempt from all rules. And Aunt Jacqueline, she was the enforcer. She was the one they called when the subjects got unruly. She was the neutral party who was never actually neutral. I picked up the phone. I didn't say hello. Jasmine, she said, her voice dripping with that weaponized sweetness I knew so well. Your mother called me. She is beside herself. We are all very worried about your mental state. You know, winter is hard on your father's heart. Do you want to be the reason he ends up in the hospital? The script was so predictable it was almost boring. Step 1, question my sanity. Step 2, threaten a medical emergency. Step 3, demand compliance. In the past, I would have apologized. I would have explained that I was just stressed. I would have folded. But today I wasn't playing by their script. Aunt Jackie, I said, my voice flat. I am not having a mental health crisis. She paused, thrown off rhythm. Excuse me. I heard what they said on the video, Jackie. I heard my father call me a glorified ATM without a PIN code. I heard him say my only value is my silence. Well, the ATM is out of order, and the silence is over. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Jasmine, people say things they don't mean when they are blowing off steam. You are holding a grudge over a joke. A joke, I repeated. $102,000 is an expensive punchline. Tell Robert the bank is closed. I hung up before she could respond. Then I blocked her too. The conversation didn't leave me shaking. It left me cold. It realized that cutting off the money wasn't enough. I needed to sever the legal ties. As long as my name was attached to that mortgage as a guarantor, I was vulnerable. If they defaulted, which they would, it would hit my credit score. I opened my laptop and found the number for the loan officer at the bank, a Mr. Henderson. I dialed. Good afternoon, Mr. Henderson, I said when he answered. This is Jasmine. I am calling regarding the property on Elm Street. I need to know the process for removing my name as the guarantor on the mortgage. There was the sound of typing on the other end. Then, silence. A long, confused silence. Miss Jasmine, I am looking at the file here, he said slowly. You aren't listed as a guarantor anymore. I frowned. What do you mean? I signed the papers 2 years ago? Yes, but the loan was refinanced 6 months ago, he said. The title was transferred. The property is now solely in the name of Gabrielle. The room seemed to tilt. Repeat that, I said. The deed was transferred to Gabrielle 6 months ago. Your parents signed it over. They said it was for estate planning purposes. You aren't on the title, and you aren't on the loan. I thanked him and hung up the phone. I sat there, staring at the blank wall. For the last 6 months, I had been sending $4,250 a month to pay off a mortgage on a house that didn't even belong to my parents anymore. It belonged to Gabrielle. My parents had secretly gifted the house to the sister who called me a pathetic failure, and they had kept me paying for it. They had me funding her inheritance while I rented a shoebox in the city. This wasn't just ingratitude. This wasn't just a toxic family dynamic. This was fraud. The last shred of guilt I felt evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard rage that settled in the center of my chest like a stone. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to burn the bridge, and I was going to use their own paperwork to light the match. The elevator doors dinged open, revealing the polished marble lobby. It was empty, save for the concierge who glanced up and then quickly back down at his screen. I walked straight to the front desk. "Can you please call up to apartment 32B, I asked, my voice calm. "Tell Mr. Robert and Miss Gabrielle that Jasmine is here. And I have something for them." The concierge hesitated, then picked up the phone. The elevator ride was silent. I watched the numbers tick upward, each one bringing me closer to the confrontation I had been avoiding for years. When the doors opened on the 32nd floor, Robert and Gabrielle were already waiting in the hallway. Gabrielle looked furious. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You're embarrassing us." Robert tried to play the peacemaker. "Now, girls, let's just calm down. Jasmine, honey, why don't you come inside? We can talk about this." "No," I said. "We're done talking." I pulled the folder from my bag. "Here," I said, handing it to Gabrielle. "This is for you." She frowned, taking the folder. "What is it?" "It's the deed transfer record," I said. "Congratulations on the house. It's fully yours now." Gabrielle's eyes widened as she scanned the document. Robert's face went pale. "And this," I continued, pulling out another sheet of paper, "is the cancellation notice for the mortgage payments. The next payment is $4,250. It's due Tuesday. Good luck." I turned and walked back to the elevator. "Jasmine, wait," Robert called out. "You can't just leave us like this." "Watch me," I said, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Gabrielle staring at the papers in her hand, her face a mask of shock and fear. Robert was still shouting something, but his voice was muffled by the closing doors. The silence in the elevator was deafening. But for the first time in my life, it wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. I had finally cut the cord. I was free. 30 days later, I received a message from my cousin Sarah. "Just wanted to let you know," she wrote. "Gabrielle couldn't make the payments. The house is in pre-foreclosure. Mom and Dad are staying with Aunt Jackie, but it's not going well. They're fighting constantly. Mom blames Dad for not managing the money better. Dad blames Gabrielle for being irresponsible. Gabrielle blames everyone but herself." I set the phone down on the coffee table. I walked to the window, looking out at the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan. The sky was a pale, icy blue, and the water was still. For years, I had been the scapegoat. I had been the designated trash can for my family's anxiety, insecurity, and dysfunction. Whenever something went wrong, it was my fault. Whenever they needed something, it was my responsibility. But now the scapegoat was gone, and without me there to absorb the toxicity, the system had turned on itself. They were cannibalizing each other, consumed by the very dysfunction they had tried to project onto me. I picked up my laptop and opened the evidence folder. I selected the spreadsheet, the video, the screenshots, the emails. I highlighted them all. Right-click, delete. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete these items?" I smiled. "Yes." I closed the laptop and took a sip of my tea. The silence in the apartment was absolute. No notifications, no demands, no guilt, just space. I had spent years trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. I had tried to buy love with money, with silence, with sacrifice. But you can't buy what isn't for sale. I realized then that the chaos wasn't mine to fix. It never had been. I was free. If you've ever felt like the glue holding a broken family together, share this story. And tell me in the comments, what is the one boundary you are terrified to set but know you need to?